I want to talk with you this morning about the power of acceptance and unconditional love. And on the way to talking about that, I want to talk about how we get into a place where we need acceptance and unconditional love. Okay? And I'm going to be talking about this somewhat in terms of my experience, just as a way of illustrating what I want to talk about. But understand as I'm talking about this that what I'm talking about is a universal process that we all go through. And so as I'm describing this, what I'm hoping you'll do is to look to your own experience of how this happened, what I'm getting ready to describe. Okay? So the way, as far as I can see, the way it goes for a human being is at the beginning, we're born into a state of innocence. In my own case, at one point I was this little boy named David. This little kid David is that he was really here. He was in this life. He was embodied. He wasn't self-conscious. He wasn't concerned about himself. He was just here. And because he was here, he experienced this world that we live in, and he experienced his own self with a sense of wonder and awe. He loved to lay underneath the cherry tree and look up into the branches and watching the wind through the branches. And I remember one time, this is in my book, but one of the most vivid memories from that time in my life was looking up there and realizing, watching the leaves move in the wind, and realizing that there's something other than me that is making things happen. And it just seemed like such a revelation that there's something larger than me that is making all this happen. So the next thing that happens is that doesn't last, and we begin to grow up. And as we begin to grow up, we have to find a way to fit into this world that we live in. And this world that we live in, as is, I'm sure is obvious to all of you, is full of all sorts of unhappiness, all sorts of confusion, prejudice, unfairness. And we have to learn to somehow fit into that world. We take on a series of beliefs and assumptions about the way things are that are completely fictional and kind of poisonous, actually. But it's the kind of stuff that we all accept because we all were taught these things. For example, we're taught that there is a real thing that's called good and a real thing that's called bad. And it's possible to be one or the other. And we're punished for not following the rules, not following the way that society is set up. I think we could even go so far as to say we're punished for being ourselves. I look at this, so there's this thing I call conditioned mind, which is, it's sort of the internalization of what I'm talking about right now. It's a collection of beliefs and assumptions and thought patterns that help us to survive in the world, this crazy world that we live in. It helps us to adapt and be a part of things, and be a part of society. A foundational part of what I call conditioned mind, of this system of survival that is internalized in our mind, is self-judgment. So we learn to judge ourselves for being ourselves. The right way to be is, this inauthentic person. The wrong way to be is this authentic person. There's another way to be in this life than to live as this fake, unhappy, dissatisfied person. There's a completely different possibility. Unfortunately, and this is really hard to witness in this world that we live in, it appears as if not everyone is provided an opportunity to find that out. It requires willingness, it requires deep commitment, it requires a ton of guts. I decided to go to a monastery in order to learn what she obviously understood, but I didn't. And so I went. We go from innocence into conditioned mind, we suffer, and then for those of us who are fortunate, the next thing that can happen is we move out of suffering back to innocence. So we go from innocence into experience, and then the possibility that's here is we can come back to innocence, but because we've gone through that, now we all, in addition to the innocence, we also have awareness. We have consciousness. We have experience. For those who have the opportunity, you get to go through that process and return to the state of innocence with awareness and consciousness, and then you can see the whole, it's like you can see the whole playing field. And from that place, there's a choice. Do I want to live as this person who suffers? Or would I rather be free of that? And that choice is absolutely available once we have learned how to move back into that state of innocence and awareness. And so this place that I'm talking about it's not, it's human, of course, because I'm human, but it's not the experience of a separate self who suffers. In a way, it's very personal. When you're in that place, you're taking everything personally. This is all happening to me. I'm getting triggered all over the place by all these things that are happening because I'm taking everything personally. But that's not what's happening over here. Over here, it's impersonal, which is kind of wild to think about, isn't it? That as a being with a body, I can have an impersonal experience of life. It's not about me because there isn't anybody there. In that place, there's nobody there. There's not a person to suffer, and that's why you don't suffer. It's kind of like in different traditions, people talk about it as like the God within, or I can save him. I can save this suffering human. Excuse me. I can save this suffering human from the reality he lives in because it's not real. He doesn't have to live there anymore. Because I, from this bigger place, can see there's nothing wrong with this guy. There never has been. He was just taught that there was, and he believed it. That's it. He's not incompetent. He's not inadequate. Quite the opposite. He's incredibly competent. He's adequate to everything that comes his way. He's a beautiful human being. But especially if something difficult happens, I'm like, I'm here with you. I'll take care of you. I love you. I love you unconditionally. I accept you just the way you are. You don't have to prove anything to have my love. You don't have to be different. You don't have to improve yourself. Nothing. I love you exactly as you are. And this relationship, this is what a happy life is learning how to step out of being that conditioned person and to love and accept that conditioned person as he or she is. It's sort of like that's where it all comes together, and that's where life becomes truly joyful.